Until about a year ago, I can't tell you about a time in my life where I didn't feel at least slightly ashamed of my own existence after the age of 5. When I was 5 years old, I was sexually assaulted for the first time. My teenage babysitter took advantage of me, and I didn't tell anyone for 10 years. Then at 14, an 18-year-old man held up my unconscious body and blew himself with it. Again at 19, another man held me down and wouldn't stop regardless of me resisting physically and saying no. That same man was the person I had had my first safe and pleasant sexual experience with just a few years prior. So of course, that night, I thought I would be totally taken care of when I went home with him from the frat. The most recent time actually happened in April of this year. It actually happened on April Fool's Day, which I can't help but laugh at how fucked up that is. It's okay, you can laugh too. We wouldn't survive without the humor, I'll tell you right now. This time was the most violent. Months later, my jaw is still recovering from the minutes his hands were wrapped around my neck. While all of these experiences are very different, they've all left me with the same feeling of shame inside. Like I had done something wrong. Like I was the thing that was wrong, and that's why these bad experiences kept happening. I was the common denominator after all. That shame is the reason I didn't want to tell anyone. It's the reason why I questioned whether or not I could even consider these experiences sexual assault. It literally took me 9 years to recognize that a man holding up my unconscious lifeless body and using it to pleasure himself was considered assault. 6 months prior, I hadn't even had my first kiss. I want to take a moment to speak to the survivors that are sitting in this room right now. And if you are not a survivor, this is a great opportunity for you to really listen and understand more deeply what it's like to be one of us. If you are a survivor of sexual assault and you are ashamed, you are not alone. If you catch yourself questioning whether or not it was really that bad, or if it can even be considered assault, yes, it was, and yes, it is. If you are a survivor of sexual assault and you're afraid to come forward to yourself or to others because you don't want to make it too big of a deal, you are not alone. What has happened to you is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. There is nothing to be ashamed of. And if you are a survivor of sexual assault, I'm here tonight to give you permission to let that shit go. Let that shame go. I need you to let that shame go. All the other people who are questioning their own sanity because of something that someone else did to them need you to let that shame go. Even if it's just for tonight. Because I promise you it's gonna come back, and that's okay. And when it does, I give you permission eternally to let it go again and again and again. When you let go of your shame, you give every other person, permission that's in your shoes to do the same thing. I don't care what you did leading up to that point. I don't care if you said yes to going over to their apartment. I don't care if you said yes to sleeping with them. If you are having sex that is consensual and it becomes non-consensual and they don't stop, that is sexual assault. Verbal communication is not the only form of consent. If you said no once and were too afraid to say it again when they wouldn't stop, that is not consent. If every fiber of your being signaled no, except for your words, that's not consent. Not saying no does not equal consent. I really want to thank y'all, each of you, for being here tonight, for taking the time, taking the energy, the emotional energy it's going to take to sit in this room. I highly value and deeply appreciate your presence. My request is that you sit in this room tonight with an open heart, whether you're sharing or not, and that you're open to learning something new and potentially even thinking of certain things differently. So, obviously, the whole goal of being here tonight, the goal of this mission is to eradicate sexual assault. How can we make it not happen anymore? And what do we do when it does? If I'm really honest with myself, and I look at every time in the past 10 years I've been sexually assaulted, there's one thing in common. I didn't feel worthy of being who I am. I had lost touch with my own worthiness, an inherent birthright to be honored and respected as a human being, and my actions reflected it. And while it's not the case with every situation, after speaking to so many friends and other people about their experiences with sexual assault and looking at mine, one really painful thing was clear. There were 100 moments before it was too late where I could have gotten myself out of the situation. if I had listened to my gut, if I had not been afraid of being inconvenient or embarrassing the other person. I want to take a moment and ask y'all a question. Who in this room, regardless of if it was having to do with sexual consent, anything sexual, just in general, as a human being, raise your hand if you have ever stayed in a situation that you probably knew in your core wasn't a good one out of fear of embarrassing the other person. I think we all have. Natural as human beings, we don't want to, and I just got to say real quick, it's especially for women, we don't want to be inconvenient. Everything we've been taught growing up was to not be inconvenient. Look at the way that we were all put through the school system. We're taught to be obedient. Don't talk back. Since when is asking a question talking back? I never could understand that one. Now, if you've ever stayed in a situation because you were afraid of embarrassing or inconveniencing the other person, I'm curious how many of y'all, after the fact, even if just a little bit, regretted that situation. I'm like, can I jump up and down? The thing about self-worth and self-trust is it's directly linked to self-protection. If you want to learn how to protect yourself, you gotta learn how to trust yourself and trust your worth, so that the next time you're sitting somewhere or you're in any situation, regardless of the matter, and something feels off, something doesn't feel right, even slightly, you can go, I think I'm gonna head out. I don't feel so good. Let's do this again next time. And if after the fact you're like, I'd like to see that person again, I'd like to go study with them again, you can always reschedule. Any person, any situation, any relationship that's meant for you will still be there after you say no. There will always be another chance. So, learning how to protect ourselves. Safety is an inside job. Not entirely. I'm not, let me be clear. I'm not saying, sorry guys, no one's gonna protect you, so you gotta protect yourself. Safety is an inside job first and foremost. When you build safety from the inside out, you become pretty damn unshakable. And the protection you receive around you is just icing on the cake. And inner safety, inner worth, inner knowing is not just about knowing it in your head. I can't tell you how many Tony Robbins conferences or any type of personal development seminar or yoga retreat or anything like that I've been to and been like, oh my God, yes, I am so worthy. Oh, duh, how did I not see it before? I don't know if any of you have ever done any type of personal work and have had the same epiphany where you're like, it's so obvious, of course I'm worthy. And then I go home and nothing changes because nothing changes. I might still know it in my head 6 months later, but I'm worthy. Why do these situations that I don't like keep happening? Why is the universe out to get me? I remembered I was worthy that one time 6 months ago. Isn't everything supposed to be different now? Worthiness is something you have to know deep in your bones. You have to breathe worthiness. You have to walk worthiness in every single thing you do. When you know you're worthy, boundaries become second nature. It's like, fucking duh, I don't feel good in the situation. Of course I'm gonna leave. I can tell you that because I've been in both places. About a year ago, I was like oozing worthiness out of every fiber of my being. I'd been doing that deep inner work. So in April, it shocked the hell out of me when I was assaulted again. And I knew the whole time, the closer it got to that date, the less worthy I was feeling. I stopped believing it. I stopped knowing it on the inside. I want to talk to y'all about something that might be really challenging to listen to. First, I want to acknowledge this campus specifically and the pain y'all have experienced. I am so sorry for what has happened. I'm so sorry for all of the heartache, for all of the hurt, the unnecessary hurt. I'm so sorry for how unfair it is that we have to even be in this room right now. That I'm actually sorry I'm here. And I'll be honest, I don't know the solution to fixing the Title IX process. I know it's fucked up, it doesn't work. I don't know how to fix it. And even if I did, one thing I do know is the months or years it would take for those things to shift, for the actual processes to be changed. I'm here to talk about what we can do right now. I'm here to talk about you. Even though I'm the only one speaking right now, this is a conversation between me and you and you and you and you. I'm here to be with y'all and give y'all tools to start removing some of that hurt, cleaning out some of that pain, and healing the wounds that happened that really never should have. As a society, we've collapsed two words together: blame and accountability. When we say that we need to hold someone accountable, oftentimes what we mean, and I'm talking about every situation here, we usually mean we need to find who is at fault and who is to blame. We always have someone to blame, and for good reason. The only problem is when we blame, we give all our power away. Hang in there with me. We can only hold someone accountable to the degree in which we are willing to hold ourselves accountable. I learned that the hard way. And here's what I mean by this. And after I'm speaking, when we go into more of a training workshop, this will be covered in more depth. And I invite every single one of you to stay. I would really love that. I'm not saying that you did something wrong. If you're a survivor or like I said, I'm speaking to everybody about this. This is a situation for all people, issue for all people. There's nothing you did wrong. There's nothing you could have done better. We are all doing the very best we can with what we have access to in that moment. When I talk about accountability, I'm saying being accountable for yourself in experiencing that experience. Even if there's really nothing you could have done and it was completely tragic, you were still there. And the problem with blame is when we just completely throw blame onto everything else, we dissociate from the situation and we completely inhibit ourselves to heal from it. Blame is an unproductive behavior. And letting go of blame isn't about being a good person. I'm not like gonna have us all standing in a circle wearing white robes singing Kumbaya by the end of this, I promise. It's letting go of blame is for you. It's about retrieving the power that that abuser or that person tried to take from you. When we let go of blame, we empower ourselves to take accountability for how we move forward in life, especially when we feel like the system has failed us. Letting go of blame includes letting go of shame. Ever notice that they're almost the same word? I mentioned the most recent time I've been sexually assaulted and how it was different. It was different. It was very different in so many ways. One of them being that happened so many years later when I was like so crystal clear. I was in the clear. I was like teaching this stuff to people when it happened to me. And when it happened, I really had to take a step back and be like, shit. Everyone's talking about past trauma. No one's talking about current trauma and what to do when it still happens. The thing that was also really different about this time was the healing process. It was harder. Let me put it this way. It was more challenging, took a lot more effort, felt a lot more emotions. It was also 10 times faster. And I'll never claim to be healed. If someone ever does, just run the other way. However, overall, that wound, it's pretty sealed. Because when it happened to me, I knew not to shame myself for it. I knew that while that other person was 100% accountable, and it was tragic what happened, and in no way okay will it ever be okay, I knew to take accountability for the fact that I was existing in that moment, in that situation. My body was there. It happened to me, and it was my accountability to pick myself up after and figure out how to move forward. If I blamed him for all of it, I would still be sitting on the floor in my closet, bawling my eyes out. I wouldn't be here getting the opportunity to connect with y'all. Sexual assault is a symptom of us forgetting that we're all one. This is not a problem for survivors only to worry about. This is not a problem for just survivors and people who know survivors closely to worry about. Sadly, that's most of the population at this point. This is an issue that in order for us to eradicate it, every person, every human needs to be so on board about how not okay this is and how much we will not tolerate it. This is a human problem. And when every single one of us commit to doing the work it takes to have the hard conversations, to build the relationships, to communicate, we drastically reduce the rates at which this terrible thing happens. I want to ask y'all another question. How many people in here right now feel uncomfortable sharing your absolute true feelings with others? Especially those that you're romantically involved with. I have one of the most rock solid partnerships I've seen, and literally last night in my hotel room, I was too afraid to say what was wrong to the person that I know loves me more than anything in the whole world. No matter how much we practice these things, no matter how good we get at communicating, no matter how much courage we have, we're still gonna have moments where it's just really scary to be a human. I always like to say we're just all a bunch of like really big babies trying to figure it out. Like we're all just like children that get bigger somehow. And everyone is so fucking scared. Let me tell you right now. But when we start to peel back those layers, we stop hiding. We start talking. And we don't just say everything on top of the truth. We actually start saying what is the truth. We get to learn that there's nothing to be afraid of. We feel safe with ourselves. We're able to speak and open, knowing that if the other person chooses to close off, we got ourselves anyways. I want to share a quote with y'all. I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or how many. Who thinks that sounds pretty good? Right? Yeah. Every single person sitting in this room tonight is resilient as hell. I know that because you're a person, you're a human. Earth school ain't for the weak, let me tell you that. When we come together, when we start having these conversations, when we start just being real, we stop having to be so resilient. We stop having to be so strong. And we just get to be happy. That being said, I would love to take any questions that anybody has currently. Also, don't be afraid to ask the hard ones. How about your hand goes up? Yes. Someone will run you a mic, actually.
Going back to what you were talking about with blaming the other person, could you, I guess, explain what you mean by holding yourself accountable in the moment, like emotionally, and like, I guess that's sort of an unfamiliar approach that I've heard before,
Yeah.
and I would just love for you to explain more on that.
Thank you so much. What I mean by that, the emotions that you feel because of that situation, they're your accountability. The emotions we feel at any point in time are our accountability. I'm not saying that it means you condone what the other person did or said. All I mean is that it is you are the one that gets to say, yeah, that's my sadness, that's my grief, that's my hurt. And you're the one that gets to feel it and process it. And so when I talk about, I know that it can be like, you guys might have been like, excuse me, what the hell? Like, what are you trying to say here? When I talk about blame, what I'm talking about is taking everything about the situation, the impact it had on you, how you felt about it, any of that, and like removing yourself from it. Saying that's not mine because that's not fair what happened to me. Accountability is getting to say, that's not okay. This person needs to be held accountable. And as a result of this really shitty thing happening, I have these emotions that I now need to process. I need to be the one to go get the therapist or talk to somebody or ask for support. Does that make a little bit more sense? Okay, do you have anything else that you are not clear on about that? Okay. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Thanks. I'm just like wondering, like with like PTSD and all that, how does one engage in a healthy relationship after with all the fear that like I or someone else would have?
So, thank you for that question. That's a question I'm sure a lot of people are asking, myself included at the time. The most important thing is, so when we enter in a relationship with anybody, regardless of if you are experiencing PTSD or not, is the most important thing is that we have that inner safety, that we can hold ourselves, that we have, even, it's not even the safety of like, everything's good now, I'm fine. It's the safety of when that wave of grief hits me like a freaking train, I know that I have enough like emotional integrity to feel that emotion on my own, that I'm not going to go project that emotion onto someone else because I can't handle it. Does that make sense? Oh, I'm not done. So I like to talk. So when it comes to a relationship, the most important thing is that you have that you can hold yourself. Like, actually, my relationship, it was my best friend of a whole year. And whenever I went through my most recent sexual assault, one of the reasons we're together is literally because of that assault. And I leaned on him as a best friend. And it wasn't that he was carrying me. It's that he held me while I carried myself. And he sat there and held space for me to feel those emotions, for me to cry. He tucked me into bed when I just wanted someone there while I felt my own sadness and fear. Had I not been able to do that, I guarantee you this relationship would be a total train wreck and probably not happening anymore. So, and I think I really appreciate that question, because when you enter into a relationship, regardless of like whether you're a survivor of this or not, it's so important to hold yourself through that, and also pay really close attention to how you feel when you're with that person. I'm sure y'all have heard this before. Butterflies are not good. Run from them. If it's been like more than a month, run. It means you don't feel safe. So find someone that feels like home. Find someone that's a champion for your success and will not only support you and hold you while you carry yourself, but will also hold you accountable and won't just tell you what you want to hear. And I would say that a lot of times it takes longer than we think to be ready for a relationship. And then sometimes it's like way sooner than we think, right? So the last thing I would do is, if you feel super safe and you feel at home with someone, they support you in great ways, and you're like, wow, everything about this feels really good, and I feel good, like I got myself. But you know, I was just sexually assaulted 6 months ago, and I have PTSD. I don't think I can do this. I shouldn't do that. No, screw that. If you have the safety, they feel like home, and you got yourself, go for it. It's going to take a different amount of time for everybody. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Anybody else? Yes. Somebody's going to run you a mic.
My question is, in the beginning of this, you said if you have to think if it's sexual assault, then it is. How do you prepare / defend yourself for people, like when you do explain to other people, how do you prepare and defend your situation?
I'm sorry, will you talk a little bit closer?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Is that better?
How do you prepare and defend when what? Sorry.
Because you were like, if you have to think it's sexual assault, then it is. How do you prepare to like come out with that if it's not as serious, or not everything serious, but how do you?
I know what you mean, yeah. Here's another thing I want to talk about with y'all. Right now, I'm sure especially on this campus, with how big of an issue this is, there might be peer pressure that if you're not reporting it or you're not telling everybody, then you're part of the problem. Yeah. This is everyone, this is your issue. It's so personal to you. It is so close to you. And until you are ready, don't let anybody tell you that you have to talk about it until you're ready. You should never share this from a place of, well, fuck, I don't want to be a part of the problem, so I guess I get better, post this on Instagram or tell everyone. No, that's not how it works. It's what feels safe for you. And if you're a friend of somebody who comes to you and has the courage and the safety to confide in you, please do not tell them that they need to go report this and tell everyone. Be in listening ear, be there to support, ask, how can I support you? As a survivor, I will tell you right now, one of the hardest things I've had to heal from is the fact that I chose not to report any of my offenders. That is a deeply challenging experience, especially when you know that there's a really good chance that he could do it again, or she could do it, or they could do it again. But also honoring myself enough to know I do not want to put myself through that situation. I know that I don't have the evidence. I don't want to put myself through that. So regardless of your situation, I give you permission to hold it sacred to you and only share it with people in situations that feel good. It feels really good for me to stand up here and share this with you. Back in May, hell no, absolutely not. So you just have to really listen to yourself, and goes back to trusting yourself. Trust yourself on when that feels right. And also be sure to communicate really clearly whenever you tell someone. If you do confide in a friend or a family member, you can lead with, I'm going to tell you something that happened. All I want you to do is listen. Oh, I really need you to just support me and listen to me in this, because I'm trying to wrap my head around what just happened. That makes sense? Okay. Does anyone else have any other? All right, Anne, you. Oh, raise your hand again. Straight back, right there. Yeah.
I know Texas has pretty loose gun laws, probably more so than here. So just wanted to get your opinion on survivors carrying to feel more safe if it's like poses more harm than it could do good. Because I know that could be a common step to take.
Okay. Y'all really aren't afraid to ask those hard questions. I love it. I've got my work cut out for me. Here's what I would say about that. It goes back to the question of, with the relationships. Can you be responsible with a gun? Are you still too traumatized that you don't know if you would be clear on when to use that? Right? Like I'd say that if you're still deeply healing from something like that, I wouldn't put yourself in a situation where you'd have to make a decision like that. I believe that everybody needs to make their own decision about that. I would strongly, strongly encourage anyone who's still like in the middle of healing something to not do that, because not even like for everyone else's safety, but for your own. Because I'm never going to encourage you to put yourself in a situation that could cause a lot more trauma. Like the responsibility of carrying that, knowing that like you'd have to make that decision. I couldn't do that. So I really think it's a personal choice. And I would say that it is absolutely a choice that would need to be made once you are like really, really, really solid with yourself. Does that answer your question?
Do you feel that it's like common in?
Will you say that again? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, no, I got it. Do you feel that in Texas that you like see it? I don't know how much you work specifically with people there.
I actually like don't. It's not like okay, here's what I'll say. I don't personally own a gun. I know a lot of people who own guns. I also know people who don't own guns. There's not a gun in my house, but I do know I have friends that have them. I don't know anybody personally. I might know one person like very far removed that concealed carries, or I know there's people, but I've never like been in a store and been like, oh, gay, that person's back in. Like, it's maybe because I'm also not looking for it. So I'm sure if I looked harder, I could probably notice that, but it's just not something that I'm super exposed to, I would say. And somebody else in the back has a question. And thank you for your question. I really appreciate that one. Totally was unexpected.
Hello. Okay. I don't really know if there is an answer to this, but how do you and how can we as a campus navigate like being activists, having these conversations while also using language that's not triggering to survivors? Because I don't know, I feel like a lot of the things I've seen circulated on campus has the potential to be really triggering, and just how can we navigate that?
Can you give me an example of what you would consider triggering language? Like a sentence or a phrase, something you've seen?
Like, disclaimer to everyone in the room, you gotta cover your ears, do you? Like UVM protects rapists, like using those really hard hitting words, like how do we navigate that?
All right, so thank you for that question. Going back to blame. Here's the thing. This is the really, really hard thing about this issue. And I promised I'd be open and honest, and as much as it scares me to like have to, to share this, it's like, if we want this issue to change, to be solved, we absolutely must hold people accountable. And we also have to save room for rehabilitation. If our solution is every single person that gets accused of sexual assault, well, then fuck you, you're canceled forever. It just doesn't work. It doesn't solve the problem. So I personally believe that I think it's amazing that you guys have so much passion for protecting survivors and giving them a voice and being their voice when they don't feel like they have one. And I also think it's really important to be mindful of the language we use and the way in which we go about holding people accountable. I guarantee you there's people in this room that might even be wondering after this conversation, like, oh my God, have I been an abuser before and didn't even realize? Like, it's about how do we teach each other to treat each other better? And there has to be room for the people who have screwed up, because it's such a complex issue, to learn from their mistakes and not just, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore because I'll get in trouble, but genuinely give them the permission to heal themselves on the inside so that they understand they can't do that anymore because it's not right. And so I'd say with the language, just be really mindful of what you're using. Maybe, that sign of UVA sports rapists could I'm sorry, UVM. I kept doing that earlier and I was like, darn it. This is not Virginia, it's Vermont. My apologies, I'm still human. So, instead of UVM supports rapists, maybe you could, instead of speaking in defense, like towards the abusers, you could speak on behalf of the survivors and put something on the signs that says like, UVM survivors need to be heard. UVM survivors need to be protected. Does that make sense? All right. Can anyone do a time check for me really quick? Oh, okay, perfect. And we run that mic. Let's do 1 to 2 more questions. And then whenever we come back in and we do this training, we're gonna actually have a lot, this is gonna be, like I said, this is a conversation, and we're gonna have a lot more time to, through that whole thing, have you guys raise your hand. So this is not the only Q&A we're doing, but I just wanna be mindful of time. And someone right there in the middle is raising their hand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think it's working now. I know you mentioned that one of your biggest regrets was like not reporting and that you had been sexually assaulted on a college campus. So you mentioned like a fraternity. And I guess I was just wondering, like, if you could go back and do it again, would you report? And if you did, would you go through Title IX or would you have gone through like a formal police report?
Okay, so thank you for that question. I think you might have misheard me. I actually didn't say, I said I chose to not report them, and that when a survivor chooses to not support, there's trauma in that we have to heal from. I personally don't regret not reporting my abusers, because I do know that whether I'm going through Title IX or I'm going through just a formal investigation, that I'm, not probably going to be the one to win. And if I'm being really honest, I didn't want the people who did that to me, I didn't want them to have their lives ruined. I didn't want them to go to prison or go to jail. What my deepest hope is that they're able to recognize that their actions are not okay and that they can be held accountable. And at the time I didn't have, what I do wish is that I had a way to hold them accountable without a formal police investigation or Title IX investigation. And something I'm really passionate about is how can we find something that is more in the middle for like these really complex issues, where if somebody doesn't want to report it and have them convicted, there's still a way to officially hold them accountable.